Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. If you want to be a friend of mine, all you gotta do is hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And our first story of the day is by Patient Adventurous 98. He gets exactly what he asked for. This happened when I, female, 20 at the time, was a junior in college. Here's some context. I had taken a long weekend trip to Florida with a friend of mine to visit her brother and go to the Universal Studios Fright Night Halloween event, which was awesome by the way. We had an amazing trip, and we were on the plane about to head home. This was only my second ever time with air travel. We didn't have much when I was growing up, so vacations were not a regular thing, and the ones we took were low-key. So there I was, just excited to be flying in my coach seat, waiting to take off. And we kept waiting. It became clear that there was a problem with the plane when the flight attendant started calling various passengers to exit to be placed on different flights so they'd make their necessary connections. Eventually, after around 40 minutes, it was just my friend and I plus around 6 other people. It then was our turn to leave the plane. We were sort of near the end of the group, tromping back out into the waiting area. One couple, probably in their mid-50s, had stormed up ahead of us. And by the time my friend and I emerged from the gate entrance, the rude husband was already berating the pair of attendants, who, to their credit, remained poised and calm. They tried to reassure him, but he was talking over them. "This is unacceptable. You better get me the same seats we had on that flight." He had the first row in coach, the one with no seats in front of it and therefore the extra legroom. By then, the rest of us had gathered around, and the attendants began addressing the whole group, offering reassurances, filling us in that there was a critical problem with the plane, which made me very glad for the change, despite the inconvenience. The rude husband was going off through all of this, and when the attendants left to make arrangements for us all, he and his wife sat there and continued his commentary to his poor wife. "Unacceptable, how dare they? Better have the same seats," and so on. Shortly, the attendants returned, and the man practically rushed them, saying, "I demand you make this right." The attendant smiled and said, "You guys are all set, sir." And she smiled at him specifically. "I'm very happy to tell you that we have a flight leaving shortly, and we were able to give you and your wife the exact same seats you had booked on the previous flight." The rude husband said, "I should hope so. That's the least you can do." And he huffily returns to his seat. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just waiting. The attendant then turns to us and she says, "And I'm happy to let everyone else know that you'll all be flying first class with us today." The rude husband was furious and immediately jumped up to demand why they weren't flying first class, while the rest of us just sat there in a state of stunned glee. The attendant just informed the man that she'd given him his request and didn't stick around for more abuse. The wait wasn't long, and soon my friend and I were boarded into the unicorn fabled place that is first class. As a poor air travel newbie, it was like some fantasy land. Huge seats, real hot washcloths, and though we were underage and couldn't partake in the free cocktail, we did get to choose from a basket of distinctive Pepperidge Farm cookies. And the food. We got a whole meal which was truly delicious, with real crystal salt and pepper shakers at each place setting and actual metal cutlery. Meanwhile, rude husband is irate. My friend and I were in the last row of first class, which only had around 8 seats, and we could hear him heaping abuse on the coach attendants, going off on how kids don't deserve first class and how they should have gotten them. They're older. They should be respected, not some kids. Someone else who was in first, not from our original plane, caught on and was quite ticked with the man's ire. Then the best of all happened. The flight attendant in our section overheard the rude husband's tirade with language specifically directed at my friend and me. "Who do those kids think they are?" As unworthy of the honor he should have been granted. The attendant shook his head and addressed me and my friend and said, "I'm sorry about that. Let me take care of this for you." And he closed the curtain to the coach cabin. Rude husband realized what was happening, which makes it even better. I got one last look at his red, irate face before he was gone forever. It was glorious. I have not 1 ounce of remorse for people like this. I've experienced being around people like this who just blow up at the smallest things and they have such an attitude problem. They get red in the face, nothing you can do will make them ever feel happy. Unless of course you cave to their every demand and give them more than that. Are you as satisfied as I am that this dude had to sit there all red in the face, irate, while missing out on some great stuff? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Veterinarian Hole 250. We can't share a driveway anymore? Fine, enjoy your tiny driveway. When my significant other and I moved into our house some 20 years ago, our neighbors on one side were an elderly husband and wife who we got along with very well. Our two houses shared a driveway that ran from the street to the alley behind the houses, and we each had our own parking area in the back. The driveway was set up so that about 2 feet of it was on our property with the rest on the neighbor's property. The driveway was right up against the neighbor's house and about 8 feet from ours. We all made it a point to not park in the driveway so that we didn't block each other's way and had no problems for 15 years. Sadly, the sweet neighbors died about 5 years ago and their house was bought by Mike, a man who regularly bought old homes to rent or resell and who clearly didn't care about anything except profit. The first time that we ever met Mike was right after a car had hit our house. The driver had a stroke and lost control of his car while driving down our street. The front of his car was actually inside of our house. So here we are, freaking out because a car is literally sticking out of our house, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers, police, and emergency workers, when Mike saunters on over and introduces himself by saying that the whole driveway plus part of our garage are on his property. We tell him that he's wrong, but that this is not the time to discuss it and we'll get back to him later. We do some investigating and discover that the property line is exactly where we knew it to be and that the map Mike was using had the property line overlay off by about 2 feet. Nevertheless, Mike continues to harass us and tell us that we can't use the driveway any longer because he's going to rent the place out and it would be a liability to have us driving on his property. Fine. We'd often talked about putting in our own driveway, so now was as good a time as any. Mike was quite pleased when we told him that. At least he was until he learned that the new driveway was going in right next to his driveway along our property line. He tried to talk us into putting the driveway on the other side of our house, obviously so that he would still have use of the full existing driveway, which sat 2 feet onto our property. The look on Mike's face when he saw where the surveyor drew our property line was absolutely priceless. The line just left barely enough room for a car to fit on his side, and he couldn't widen his driveway because it already ran right next to his house. So we used a chunk of our lawn on that side to install a nice wide driveway with riverstone gravel so that it would be obvious where our driveway ended and Mike's very narrow blacktop driveway began. Mike never spoke to us again. I don't know what it is, but a good story involving property lines is always really satisfying to me. Like when you get that surveyor out and you finally find out what the borders of your house is, and in some cases you realize, hey, I've got more property than I actually thought I did, or hey, their property's actually on our property. It's like the power dynamic just totally turned around. Our next story is by As Good and As Bad as I. Cleaning company middle manager tries to tell employees on the ground how to clean. Working for a cleaning company that sends out groups of cleaners to several houses a day, middle manager comes up with a great idea. When we're washing floors on hands and knees, required of every kitchen and bathroom, we're supposedly leaving dirt behind. To remedy this, she says every time you go dunk your rag or it gets dirty, just get a clean rag so there won't be any leftover debris and stuff. We don't even bother telling her how many rags this will take, since she's always talking down to us and using this super cheerful, overly fake voice. Next day, we just get to business. Rags even a little dirty, grab a new one. The team assistant loaded way more rags than usual. We were ready. We used an ungodly amount of rags that day, but we were just following orders. Come back at end of shift, training manager sees our laundry bag and is like, "What the freak are you doing out there?" We tell her genius middle manager's plan. Next morning, we and middle manager are told not to do that again. Hated that company. If a rag gets dirty, use an entirely new one. Isn't the water or the soap or whatever there for you to wash the rags off and then go back to work? I don't know how spotless they're expecting this place to be, but dang. This next story is by IceMango359. You have to do something nice for each other each day. We can do that. So my brother and I are best friends in the world now, but like all close in age brothers, got into our fair share of scraps as kids. Our mom had enough one day. She tells us that going forward, we have to do one nice thing for each other every day. My brother and I don't like the idea of forced niceness, so we immediately begin coming up with a plan of how to follow the rules in such a way as to completely defeat the point. I don't think we even thought of the irony that our plotting meant that we were not fighting and getting along, which was the whole point. Our final plan? I give my brother a penny. He says thank you, and now he has just the perfect nice thing to give. So he hands the penny back to me, and I say thank you. I don't even remember how long this went on for or how my mom reacted, but being the sweet lady she is, she probably just got a kick out of it. I mean, to be fair, if I was a parent and I told my kids to behave and find one nice thing to do for each other, and they end up putting on a show where they hand each other a coin back and forth, saying thank you and handing it back off to each other, I think I'd be pretty happy with that actually. I wouldn't feel like scorned or maliciously complied against. I'd be like, look at my kids handing a coin back and forth and working together. This is great. And our final story of the day is by the analog koala. You want an email notification of every check-in? Okay, boss. This just happened today. I work as an integrated circuit design engineer. My team is mostly based in the Bay Area, but for some reason, my current project is being headed up on the East Coast. We haven't met the project manager in person, working remote due to COVID, and it turns out he's a bit more controlling and overbearing than we're used to. Now, chip design isn't the same as software development, but it has some similarities. We use a version control system to check in changes to the design to make sure we can roll back if there's errors or whatever. Works great. In order to keep the database manageable, we typically don't check in too often. Only when we need to make a significant change, we want others to be able to see. So we would do a few check-ins on average normally. Anyway, this new project manager came down with an edict last month that one of our KPIs, key performance indicators, one of the ways we evaluate our performance, will be how many check-ins we do. Predictably, people have started checking in new versions of their designs for every little thing they do, and it's become harder and harder to comprehend how the project is going as the history's all muddled now. The project manager's configured the version control system so he gets an email for every check-in so he can keep tabs on us. During my last one-on-one a few days ago with the project manager, I told him the team didn't want to be evaluated on check-ins anymore because doing too many check-ins is counterproductive, but the guy wouldn't budge. We're getting to the point in the project where we have to start hammering the design with tests to try to find the faults. We do this by generating many thousands of files that have test sequences in them. These are called test vectors. Then we run a program that sends our design random samplings of these test vectors. Anyway, for traceability, we check in these test vector files in the version control system. So this morning, I was on Slack with a few team members and we come up with an idea. We usually make a zip file of the test vectors to check in once, but there's a performance argument we can make to just check them in individually as raw text. So, cue the malicious compliance. Project manager wants an email from every check-in? Fine. Project manager wants to evaluate us on number of check-ins? Fine. We wrote a script that makes each team member check in a certain amount of test vectors, tens of thousands for each of us. This will nuke both his KPI results and kill his inbox. Could happen to a nicer bloke. We just launched the script 30 minutes ago, haven't gotten an email from him yet, presumably because his email inbox has melted down. Edit, he just called my cell. He was surprisingly good-natured about it. He just basically said he got the point and that was pretty clever. Then he asked some more project-related stuff. Sorry that the outcome didn't have more fireworks, but I don't think we'll be doing tons of check-ins anymore. Victory. The commonality of a lot of these stories that I see is that a manager wants to be able to check in on every single step you do. And it's not like milestone 1, milestone 2, it's more like sat down in chair, pulled up thing on computer, grabbed cup of coffee, sat back down in chair, worked for 30 minutes, rebooted Wi-Fi, worked for 30 minutes, milestone 1. After a while of getting all that information that they just don't need, hopefully they just get the point. But I guess sometimes you gotta send them tens of thousands of these updates just to get it through to them. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.